I'm Molly Kimball. Welcome to Fueled, a wellness and nutrition podcast. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition journalist with a passion to help people live their strongest, healthiest life possible. In my weekly TV segments and columns, there's a limited amount of time and space to cover everything, but there's so much more to share. This podcast is my opportunity to dive deeper into the topics you want to know about. Some of y'all may or may not know that I worked as a freelancer as a weekly nutrition columnist for the Times-Picayune for about 10 years. And over those 10 years, I developed a lot thicker skin. And I remember it wasn't even the first few weeks or months, but it was the first year, 2 years, 3 years when I would go jogging in the morning and see the newspaper on people's driveways and their lawns on the days that I knew my column was running. It would evoke intense anxiety, and not even exaggerating, I couldn't look to the side if I saw the newspapers. I just had to look ahead. It brought me so much nervousness that these words I was writing, this content I was creating was going into these people's homes. People were going to be reading it. And it made me feel very vulnerable, very nervous. And it took a long time to get to the point where it didn't elicit that reaction. And I credit the editors who were incredibly supportive at the Times-Picayune over those years with really helping to guide me through that. And, a lot of times it was as simple as, come on, Molly, you got to get thicker skin. Like if you're confident in what you're writing, you know that you've fact checked, triple checked, and what you're putting out there is accurate. Yeah, people may disagree. They may not always, like it, but as long as you know that you've done your homework and it's science-backed, it's okay. Like you've got to kind of relax on that and don't be so hard on yourself. And so I'm very grateful to the editors that I've worked with over the years who've really coached and guided me. And so today I am very honored. Our guest is Anne Maloney, and Anne is food reporter and editor for the Washington Post. And I'm really grateful to have had the opportunity to work with Anne as one of those two main editors I was talking about at the Times-Picayune when she was my editor. And she's been a friend and a mentor to me over the years. She has helped me to become a better writer, a better strategic thinker, helping to anticipate what our readers and now our listeners are asking. So essentially, what do you want to know? She helped me to really think through a lot of those questions. So she's joining us today to share an inside peek to what goes on at the Washington Post. She's been there just under a year now. She has a wealth of knowledge that she brings to the table. She has a communications degree from Loyola University here in New Orleans and a culinary arts diploma from the Institute of Culinary Education in New York City. Anne wrote for the Times-Picayune for 15 years. She was first the arts and entertainment editor, then food and dining writer and editor. And as I mentioned, Anne has been at the Washington Post for just under a year now. And it's really cool to hear just what goes into the stories we see. I know it on a smaller scale here, but it's even a whole different deal at a publication like the Washington Post. So what goes into the stories we see? How are the topics narrowed down and selected? What's the research that goes into it? How are the topics narrowed down, but then how are the recipes selected? How are the recipes tested? And she's going to share a lot about what she's learned along the way about positivity and perseverance. And as you hear about her journey through, the different aspects of her career, I think that you'll hear that, there's never a sure thing, and really just being persistent and putting our passion and putting our best into what we do truly can pay off. So I just absolutely adore Anne, and I know that after you hear our interview, you will too. I'm honored for her to join us. So welcome, Anne. I am so happy to hear your voice on the line.
Well, I'm really happy to be talking to you again. I miss you.
I
be
miss
great to
you
catch up.
too. I know. Just hearing your voice is like, it makes me long for it. So, there's so much that you have experienced, so much that you've done through your career personally. Like, I feel like you are just this wealth of knowledge, and you're almost like your own, it's like a walking encyclopedia, like resource guide. So talk to us about your journey, this road to being food writer and editor for the Washington Post, because it's been a windy, lots of twists and turns.
Yeah, I was at the Times-Picayune for about 15 years, and when the newsroom was shut down and the paper was sold, many of us lost our jobs there. So I started looking around and wasn't really sure, what would happen or where I would end up. But this amazing opportunity at the Washington Post opened up, and I applied and went there. And it's been an extraordinary opportunity. Sometimes when something sad happens, you wonder, where life's going to take you. But this has been a really wonderful opportunity. It's a great place to work. It's been a little strange being here since the pandemic because I moved to a new place and now I can't really go out and explore it. But the work itself is really rewarding and I'm enjoying it. I miss New Orleans, of course.
And looking back, like there was probably, if we had said, oh, you're going to, be living in DC in a few years, you're like, that would never happen. And here you are.
No, I mean, that's just kind of the way life is. I had somebody ask me if you could do anything you wanted to do and money was no object, what would it be? And I said, I'd love to do something where I could just cook all day and test recipes and, just really dig in. And then this job opened and that's basically what it is. And so I was just a little bit astounded that that's what happened. It's sort of, I don't want to get too touchy-feely, but where people say, put out into the universe what you want, and that's one of the ways that, you can bring it to you. And that's kind of how this felt. I verbalized it, and then here it came. And so, no, I would never have thought I would be working at the Washington Post and living in Washington, D.C. I was very happy at the Times-Picayune in New Orleans, and that's my hometown. And without, that having happened, I don't think I would be here. But it was a soft landing for me, and I really am appreciative of that and very grateful.
I don't think it's touchy-feely at all. And I know that you and I had multiple conversations during that time when there was a transition and you weren't sure what was next. And that's a hard feeling, to have such an uncertainty around us when you had something that was so sure for so long. And to have that, you did, though, you put it out there, you stayed focused on kind of what your goals were and what mattered to you and what you wanted to do to bring a happiness and like a fullness to your career. And so I think it is exactly that. You put it out there and into the universe and it comes.
Yeah, and it doesn't make me miss people any less. I miss my old colleagues any less. But, as I said, I'm really grateful to have found something that allows me to continue to do what I love to do, which is to help people eat and eat well and cook better and, sort of navigate this whole process of getting food on the table and figuring out what they can make and being reasonable and we're, looking at budgetary reasons and health reasons for the decisions that we make. So it's kind of amazing.
And you are a food writer and you have your communications degree from Loyola, but also the culinary arts diploma. So how did you end up doing that? How did you go to New York and get the culinary degree?
That was another kind of crazy thing that happened. I was actually living in Alabama editing a magazine and a job opened in Manhattan with the New York Times Company. And I saw it and I thought, well, I'm going to apply for that. What are the chances of me getting it? And I applied for it and got it. So I moved to New York and I was a features editor for the regional newspaper group there. And in New York, there's a culinary school on every corner. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but there are a lot of them. And they're designed for people who are working full time. And when I saw that, I just decided I always wanted to go to cooking school. So I just decided I was going to go. And I went on Friday nights, all day Saturday, all day Sunday for a year, and then did an externship. And it was sort of like a soup to nuts course where you learn like a survey course. So we learned everything there. And it was really helped me improve my skills and gave me a little broader knowledge. I've always felt like I was very comfortable with Southern food and New Orleans food, but by doing this program, I was able to learn more about all kinds of foods and, explore a little beyond my comfort zone.
So you did. And
make things I'd never made before. And so once I did that, I never planned to go work at a restaurant. But I knew that I always wanted to write about food. And so that was just another way for me to get a little bit more training in that area. And then I wrote a few food stories after that. But it wasn't until I became a food and dining writer at the Picayune that I did it full time.
So it was years later you did that, and then it was almost, or maybe more than a decade later that became your full-time thing.
Right. It was probably about 11 years. Yeah, something like that. So that was a really cool opportunity that you just have to kind of, when it presents itself, you have to jump on it. And then if you're able to, and you have the finances and the ability and the bandwidth in your life, and you can jump on it, you just have to try to do that. And you never know how it's all going to shake out.
And asking ourselves, why not? Like, why shouldn't I do this? Why not? And I think, a lot of times it can be really easy to talk ourselves out of things. We overthink it. We think through all these, possible scenarios. But if we can kind of just go into it if it's going to enrich us, and like, as you said, we can afford it, or we may not think we have the time, but can we make the time to do these things that expand our knowledge base, that set us up for what might not be right away, but for down the road, it's going to set us up to do even more of what we love.
Right. And it's just amazing how the universe will do that for you sometimes. You just keep plugging along, trying to do what it is you want to do, and be open to it, and be, willing to take some chances and make some sacrifices. I mean, I had to leave my close friends and family in New Orleans to come and do this, but this is the point I am in my career, and I wanted to do that. But it's not, New Orleans is a hard place to leave. It's a hard city to leave.
Most people don't do it, right? And they don't do it, and they think others who do might be a little bit crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So with the Washington Post, talking about, what that whole process looks like, and especially when we're talking about the stories that you're working on, because as readers, readers see the finished product. And I think that that's something that many people don't think of, what goes behind it. How are we deciding what we cover? How am I deciding what we're covering on this podcast, or, what we're going to write about? Mm-hmm. So how do you guys do that? How do you narrow down the topics, and then what the actual story is going to be, the recipe, the photos, just giving us a peek behind how this actually comes to be?
Well, I've been here just a little over 6 months. And so I feel like I've just sort of getting my feet under me here. And it's been a steep learning curve. This is a very serious department. It's journalism. So that, and by that I mean that everything that we do is, tested, vetted, and usually often has a news hook to it, or a reason why we're doing it. Now, we have regular columns that we write, so they're ones that just stay every week. We have them. One is a Nourish column with Ellie Krieger, and that's all about healthy eating, or healthier eating. And my boss, Joe Yonan, does a weeknight vegetarian column, so we have a vegetarian dish every week. I do Dinner in Minutes, which is something where you get to I try to do it in 30 minutes, but usually it's 45 minutes. You get a dish on the table in 45 minutes. We have those standing sorts of columns. And then we're also, the theme of our section, our overall theme, is Voraciously. And it's about accessible cooking. It's about cooking for the everyman. It's not, there's nothing snooty about it. There's nothing with, techniques that you need to go to school to learn how to do. It's about being able to cook really well in your home. And so my colleague, Becky Crystal, does most of the how-to kinds of stories. And she'll examine a technique or something that, is a fundamental thing that you need to learn how to do. And it might be something as simple as, learning to care for your cast iron so that it lasts long and it really is non-stick and it works beautifully. And then she does baking essentials, and she will take recipes that everyone should know how to make. And by that, I mean just that they're fundamental recipes, not that you should absolutely have to make it. But it could be something like banana bread, or it could be, a stewed chicken recipe, or a carrot cake, or just some roasted chicken, some basic fundamental building block recipes that you want to make. So we have that kind of furniture that we have every week, or once a month, or twice a month. But then we're also always looking at what's in the news and what people are talking about right now. So we'll look at trends in eating, trends like a particular spice or something is in the news. And so we might do a piece on that. Or we might do something on, like, I'll give you an example. When there was a controversy over Goya, the CEO of Goya went to, I think it was the Rose Garden, and he praised President Trump. And then a whole bunch of people started saying, oh, we don't want Goya products anymore. We're going to boycott Goya. So several readers asked us for different things that they bought from Goya that they wanted to make at home. And one of them was a Saison. It's a spice mix that's used in a lot of dishes from Latin American countries, Central American countries. So we looked up that recipe. We figured out, we saw just how very simple it is to make this spice blend at home. And we just did a little story on that spice blend. That's the kind of thing we try to be relevant in people's lives right now. And then we had, we heard about this grain called fonio, and it's a relatively unknown grain.
How do you say it, or how do you spell it?
It's FONIO.
Okay.
And it's a little tiny little grain. And so it was starting to be grown and was being used to stimulate the economy in sub-Saharan Africa. And so we did a story on that because I didn't know what to do with it. I wasn't familiar with it. And so we, dug into that, looked at it, did a little bit of research on it, and then we did a recipe salmon with cheesy fonio grits, So we try to just always be on the lookout for how food intersects with the economy, with the culture, even with politics, because food is political. All things about, the whole issue of sustainability and meat consumption and all of those things, GMOs, all that stuff, food intersects with all of that. So along with actually, practical recipes, we're also helping people to understand how food is affected by politics, how food is affected by the economy, and so forth. And then we also just really like good food. So sometimes we'll write about something just because it's delicious,
Or you try it somewhere, you're exposed to it, you're like, we have to.
Exactly, yeah. Or things from our childhoods, or things from freelancers, or, contract writers, they write for us on occasion. And it might be some wonderful recipe from someone's childhood and has a great story behind it. So that's also, but the main thing we want in most of our cooking is that when we're writing about a recipe and teaching you how to cook something, is that it is delicious. That's our goal, to make delicious food.
How many times do you test the recipes? And let me ask about the Goya seasoning. So y'all looked and saw, okay, here's what's in the Goya seasoning as far as the ingredients. And then here's some recipes of how to make our own version of the seasoning blend. Did y'all get cans of the Goya and do side-by-side taste comparisons to see how the recipe measured up?
Yeah, this seasoning comes in a little packet. And when you look at the Goya, for example, when you look at the Goya product, it's like orange. It's bright orange. And it has MSG in it, and it has artificial coloring, it has red and yellow coloring. Well, when you make it at home, it's like sort of a golden brown, actually a lot prettier to me. It's more earthy looking. And the flavor is a little different. And the great thing about making your own spice blends is you can control, the sodium that's in it. You can decide whether or not you want to put MSG in it. You sure can. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't think.
Or your
other people
colors.
Disagree.
Right.
Or I guess you could dye it if you wanted to. I think that's going a little too far. So, that's what's great about it is that you can reduce the sodium, or maybe, this has it has ground cumin and turmeric and pepper. So maybe you want yours a little spicier. Or you want more, you really love cumin and you want to cumin it up a bit. And so you can control that a little bit more. And I've been using it. I made it, and I've been using it in dishes that I make at home. And it's really a great little seasoning blend. Just like you would make Italian seasoning or Creole seasoning or, a Greek seasoning. This is just another one that you can make yourself.
And how many times do y'all test the recipes? Like you were saying, is it Ferroni, you said?
Fonio.
Yeah.
It depends on the recipe. There are times when I will make something, everything gets made at least twice.
And are you making it twice, or is it you and then someone else who's doing kind of a back check?
Whoever's column it is, like from my dinner in minutes, I test my own recipes. So I might make it 2 or 3 times. Mm-hmm. If I'm ever like concerned about it or worried or have any issues, I can certainly ask one of my colleagues to make it too. And we see, if there's ever an issue. One thing about most of our recipes is they're not complicated. They're not, they shouldn't be something that you struggle with. The main reason we're testing them is not because the process is complicated, but we want to try to foresee any possible, like we want to look ahead and see what could be things about this recipe that might be a stumbling block. Mm-hmm. And what visual cues, what among the 5 senses, what about the way it feels, tastes, looks, smells, can we give cues to people so that they can really have a sense of whether it's done or whether it's time to move on to the next step. So we look for things like, the size of the bubbles in the pan, or, like if you're whipping egg whites, we tell people to lift the beaters out of the egg whites and look at the peaks. If they flop over and fall, then it's not ready. If they stand up, you're ready. Mm-hmm. Continue, move on. So we try to do all those kinds of things when we're testing. So you're not only testing for amounts of the ingredients, but you're testing for the process and all of that. So some recipes, I've seen Becky make things 5, 6, 7 times. That's extreme. But when she's developing a recipe, when she's actually figuring it out, and she will try like a variety of recipes from a variety of sources, and then she will combine them into what she thinks is the best recipe. She does more recipe development than I do. And for most of them, I would say they're made at least twice, sometimes 3 times. Because then we also have to make them for the photo shoot. So you gotta make sure it comes out well, looks good, stands up, does whatever it is it's supposed to do. If it's a pie, you need to be able to cut it open. It needs to stand there and be photographed. Because our photographs are as they are. There's very little touching up that we do as far as color or any of that on photos. We try to photograph it the way it is.
That we can let it go if it's at our house, because we're like, oh yeah, this pie, for example, like it tastes incredible. Yeah, you slice it and it kind of oozes. It's a little goopy, but it doesn't matter. Just like slip it onto your plate real quickly. But you can't do that for this. It's got to hold up. So you have a test kitchen, or you have a test kitchen that you all use at the Washington Post. Tell us about that. I know like right now you're not able to use it and you're going back to the home kitchen approach for testing, but what does that look like? Is it in a separate space? Is it only used for recipe testing? Like what's kind of the official test kitchen like?
Yes, we have a test kitchen in the Washington Post building. It's on its own. It's part of the whole complex in the building. So there's the newsroom and the HR and the finance offices and all that. So it's like a little part of a floor. It's a big room. I don't know the square footage, but it's a nice sized kitchen with an island in the middle, and it has a convection stove, which I had never worked on before. So that was a little bit of a challenge. One of those glass, flat top stoves. Mm-hmm. And we have 2 ovens and, really nice sink, lots of counter space with an island in the middle, and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with cookbooks, which is amazing. That's like something I really miss. And 2 refrigerators and a freezer, and then a pantry just full of all kinds of spices and seasonings and pastas and all sorts of things that we need to make the food we make. And what happened was I came here in December. I worked there until March, and then the pandemic came and we all started working from home. So since then, we have basically cleaned out the kitchen as best we can. And we've all been working from our home kitchens and cooking at home, which is so much more challenging because one of the things that was so great was being in a room with a bunch of really smart, experienced, talented cooks. So you're cooking your dish, you're making it, you could lean over and say, hey, take a look at this. Right. What do you think? We all could taste everybody's creations. Oh, I think that needs a little more salt. I think that needs to stay in the oven a little longer. oh my gosh, you nailed it. Those kinds of conversations.
And just the brainstorm that happens when everyone's together.
Yeah.
You could Google something all day long, but you have just a few minutes worth of conversation and the flow of ideas. Was it I envision it being a place where the other reporters would happen to wander into if they were hungry or wanted to be a guinea pig for a snack?
No, what we do, the way we handle that, because you can't have that, we at the end of each day, we would invite, we have a Slack channel, Slack, the communication app that you use. We had a channel for leftovers, and we would send a note out and we would say, this is what we have available. If you'd like to try it, come on down. And then people would come and then they would be able to taste it, because we never wanted to throw any food away. And we didn't. We were really good about that. So everybody would come and take what they needed, or what they wanted to taste. And so that worked really well. And it was really fun to hear people's reactions to it. And that's the other thing we got, is more feedback that way. So now what we do is we share photos on Zoom, and we share photos on the Slack channel. We still talk about recipes. Actually, not that often, because we don't all live very close to each other, but occasionally we'll drive over and drop things off to each other's houses so we can taste them.
Right, yeah.
And so we do that. And also, if, for example, we made an ice cream recently, and one of my colleagues, Olga Mazov, made it, and I made it, and it was a little bit different color. So we had a conversation about why that was and what that meant. And I'm probably going to make it one more time just to see, why that is. And also I'll share, we're very careful about things like that. So I'm going to share the photo with the person who sent in the recipe and say, is this the color it's supposed to be? Mm-hmm. So, we're working around it as best we can. Is it ideal? No, but I mean, nothing is ideal right now.
Right. And as far as hardships goes, okay,
Yeah.
So did y'all do the photos when you would have the dishes styled and photographed? Were they photographed in the test kitchen or somewhere adjacent to it? Or was it more like a light box, or was the kitchen set up for photos to show the background?
We had a little room off the kitchen, because the kitchen is very busy. Very, very busy. So it's not that big. It's big. I mean, it's bigger than any kitchen that in anybody's, well, not anybody's home, but in most people's homes. But so we had a little room off the side. But what was so great was we could all be prepping and preparing dishes. And so the photo sessions went really well, because we'd be like, oh, the next dish is up.
Right.
The next dish is up. And then we would shoot some in the kitchen when there was a process, or there was a reason to have it in the kitchen. If you wanted to show something on the stove, or you wanted to show something in the mixer or whatever, we can do it. We could do it both ways. And so we really miss that. We miss that. That's very...
it's just in real time. You're capturing it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so different now. Now what we do is we have... because of social distancing, we have two people who are able to work together. One is a stylist and one is a photographer, and the rest of us are on Zoom. And we bring dishes to the stylist, and he finishes them off and, cleans them up and makes them look pretty. And he snaps the pictures, and we all watch on Zoom, and we let them know if something doesn't look the way it's supposed to look, or make sure it really follows the recipe. If the broccoli is bite-sized, then the broccoli needs to be bite-sized.
Right.
Whatever it is, we make sure that it actually follows the recipe carefully. And we deliver the dishes mostly cooked. Sometimes they have to be assembled right away, because you can't, we did spiced egg in a hole. Well, you can't fry an egg and drive it over to somebody's house. So well, I guess you could, but you want a fresh egg. So there's something she does.
Like you driving these dishes across town to have them photographed. Yep. And it's like, people have no idea this precious cargo that's in your car. And you're like, someone's cuts you off or stops short in front of you. You're like, oh my gosh, you have no idea what you're ruining back here.
Yeah, yesterday I drove ice cream, a coconut cream pie, a pasta dish, a skillet pasta with squash, and a cheesy miso Parmesan cheese dish over to her house, along with a whole bunch of ingredients for dishes that had to be assembled, for dishes that were a little more, weren't as quite as finished. And then all that's loaded in my car in ice chests and so forth, and I drop it off to her with my mask on, or I leave it on her porch. then she picks it up, and that's how we do it.
And you're just like taking the turns really slowly. People are like, what's wrong with this lady?
Yeah. Yeah. And, you really do have to plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we had to plan before, but now we have to plan like a lot. And we're also, I'm sorry, just like everybody else, we're avoiding going to the grocery store more often than we need to. So we try to plan really well for that as well. So we're only shopping once a week for the shoots. We're not, I used to drop into the grocery store after work whenever I needed to, but I try not to do that now. Doing it once
a week that's impressive. Like that's a lot of planning to really minimize those stops.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned the food stylist. What are some of the things, and that's something that, whenever I'll take pictures of food, mine's just with an iPhone. It's not with a professional camera, but you were involved and, saw some of the behind the scenes along the way of our Eat Fit cookbook, which we're super excited about. That was my first real experience with staging and all the textures and everything else that goes into it, way more than just the dish. I'd always been mindful of it, but that kind of put a whole new pressure on it. This is their entire career is made out of food styling. And I'm not sure that people really realize how much that goes into it. But what are some of the things that you like? I know it's not even close to what a professional stylist does, but some of the things that are like, people are trying to photograph their food for Instagram or something. Some of the things that are nice little tips for them.
Well, the main thing to me is light. You want to make sure you have enough light, but not too much light, and that the light is coming at the food in the right direction, all those kinds of things. And when I was working with a Picayune, we had professional photographers, but we didn't have food stylists. So I did all of that myself. And the photographers would help me, with a little bit with the styling, and then they would handle all the lighting. Unless I was shooting with my iPhone, which I did a lot of. So I learned a lot from people like David Grunfeld and Andrew Boyd and Chris Granger. The photographers at the Picayune. They really walked me through some things to help me do a better job. One of the things that I got that I never had before, and if you're serious about it, you should probably get one, is some kind of screen or reflector so that you can bounce light. And you're not going to learn how to do that except by doing it, unless you have a photographer who's going to come to your house and teach you like I did. But you just kind of, it's sort of a white screen, and you can just move it around the plate and make the light bounce off in different directions so that like let's say you take a picture of a pie and one part of it looks really dark. Well, if you move the screen around, you can get the light to bounce and put a little light on that spot. The other thing I would do when I was just photographing for myself is I would try to finish my dishes at the right time of day so the light was good at my house.
So I have a space, in my house where the light kind of floods into certain windows, and sometimes though it's too strong and it really like washes out, overpowers. Other times it can be a little yellowy. So just like you said, you kind of have to know those times of day. And I'll even take things outside sometimes and use the porch, and it kind of looks like a table in the background, or put things on the porch outside that kind of you can identify that it is actually the floor instead of a table.
Right. Well, that's the other thing. Don't be afraid to put it on a chair, put it on the clean floor. Don't be afraid to walk into your living room and put it next to your sofa, whatever. It really, people's homes vary a great deal. I find natural light is usually the best. And going outside can be fine if it's kind of an overcast day, but if it's too bright, then it's probably going to wash it out, like you said. So for me, it was like 11 o'clock in the morning, and then like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah. That's when the light was softer, and I had a little more flexibility.
One thing that I got recently that has been really great, it's a ring light, and it goes on a tripod, and it has a ring of light, but it's got 3 different kind of tones of light, and or hues. Like one's more of a blue light, one's more of an amber light, and one's in the middle a little bit more just like a true daylight. And that allows you, and then you can also go from like a really soft light to make it brighter, brighter, brighter. And so that allows you to also kind of counteract whatever is happening if it is too yellow or if it's too dark, and it kind of helps prevent the shadows and stuff. So that's been something I've found. It's not it's just that subtle difference that helps with the lighting as well, if you're not so fortunate to have like the right time of day. And then I've done things like a spritz of, like the olive oil misters. They're not aerosol, but you pour oil into it and then you spritz it. I'll do that onto a food if it starts to look dry, or even things like berries where taking just even your fingers and touching them with water and then having the little droplets, the natural droplets on there looks so good. And you just don't realize that sometimes dry carrots and something just doesn't look good. That moisture can really help in the appearance.
Well, you can also get yourself just pieces of, I don't know how to put them, like, pieces of wood or pieces of marble or fake marble, and you can use those. You can prop them up, behind the photo to kind of hide all the stuff that might be on your house. Put one underneath, one behind, and then kind of put the background a little out of focus, and it looks like it's on a marble countertop, or it looks like it's on a country table, or it looks like. So if you're really serious about it, you can get yourself some backdrops, or you can get a little, one of those light tent kits, like a little white box, and you put the food in it, or whatever you're photographing in it. Those are really cool. The thing I don't like about those is they sort of all look the same, and they sort of look like studio shots, and that's not what I want. But we used to use those at Jazz Fest when we would shoot food out at Jazz Fest. Sometimes we bring the little light tent with us because it's a little small thing, and it just helped you kind of take all the noise out of the photo and focus on the food.
And both of those, the ring light I mentioned, you can get on Amazon or something for about $50, and you just type in ring light. And the box that Anne's talking about, we use one for Eat Fit when you go to a restaurant, for example, and the restaurant's really dimly lit and there's not really an opportunity or a good one to take the food outside there. There's some restaurants, it would just be weird if you were lurking outside their front, shooting food in front. And so we'll use the light box, but they're like a 16 by 16 cube, and they range in the $30s, and they have like a little LED light strip inside of it. So it's a very controlled environment. And those are some things that aren't very expensive, but they can kind of help you up your game. If you, like you said, if you're kind of trying to be a little bit more serious about it, or if you're like, man, they just don't look so crisp, and that kind of stuff can help you. So testing the recipes, that's, I think, do you find that it's more thorough at the Washington Post than, other places that you've done food writing for, or I guess at the Times-Picayune?
Yes, at the Times-Picayune, it was really just me doing it. So I would ask colleagues to taste it, or I would have family members taste it, or I would bring it to people to taste. But I was basically developing recipes, cooking, doing it all in my kitchen. Here, it's more stringent. People, not only are we testing the recipes and sharing them, but we're also editing the recipes together. So if something isn't clear, the person who tested the restaurant will get a phone call. The person editing will say, well, when you say, you said cook the pasta till al dente, to 3 minutes short of al dente, and then add it to the sauce. But you don't say how long to leave it in the sauce. So do I leave it in the sauce 3 minutes? Yes. How does the person know when the pasta is done? They ask you those questions, which prompt you to provide the right cues for the reader. And so there's a lot of people touching these and looking at them and asking questions about them.
That's really,
and what's great is you have someone reading the recipe who has no idea what it's about, and they have to be able to visualize cooking it. And then you have another person who you may have edited it and give it to them, then they make it, and then they make notes on it. So there's a lot of practical, hands-on editing and testing that goes on to get them to the point where they are. So sometimes we get complaints from readers, but most often when that happens, it's either a personal preference. They don't like the flavors that you chose, which is perfectly fine. Or when you dig in with them a little bit, they'll say, "Oh, well, I used boneless chicken breast. I didn't use bone and skin on chicken thighs. I used boneless chicken breast." You're like, "Well, that's a different piece of meat, and it's going to cook differently." And so we take great pride in the fact that our recipes are really tested and they're photographed the way they look.
I bet
that's really important.
You're so careful, and you're so, anything that you've done in the past has always been, okay, you do it, you put this effort into it, you do it 3 times, reread it. but we can't catch every error when it's ours because we sometimes see things that we think are there and they're not. And it's just, you're not having that objective eye. So while I don't think that there was like a rash of things gone wrong before, I would imagine that even more now, there's a security when a story runs that it's tight, that it's solid.
It is, but we still make mistakes. We're human beings and we make mistakes. We have miscommunications, we have technical issues, we have, just somebody has a bad day, it happens. But I do feel really confident, but at the end of the day that what we're putting out there, because you're asking people to buy food and you're asking people to spend time making something. And those are two things that are very valuable. The income that you have and also your time is valuable. And I feel terrible if somebody tells me, I made that and it didn't come out and I spent an hour of my time with it and then we ate it for dinner and we weren't happy. That's not a good day, but it rarely happens. It really doesn't happen often.
And like the Eat Fit cookbook we mentioned earlier, you were also one of our recipe testers, but we had over 100 recipes tested by people in their kitchen, not chefs, because it was chefs' recipes from the restaurants, these dishes from the restaurants that we're featuring in the cookbook. Well, the way the chefs communicate a recipe is vastly different than the public. So, I had already done, as a thorough job, I feel, of like translating, the chef speak into like the layperson language. But even so, there was things that I didn't realize were assumptions that the chef made, for example. And so people didn't know what, a tomatillo was, or if they couldn't find that in the store, what would be a nice alternative to that. And I was like, wow, we would have never known to put these things in like the little sidebar tips had the recipes not been tested, and there were some that were just confusing still, or, there's just questions unanswered until you have that person who has no idea getting their hands wet, or dirty in the recipes. Are there any like recipe stories, things that have just gone like really wrong?
Yeah, I hate to, let's see if I can talk about something without identifying it. Yes, we have had recipes. I don't want to go into too much detail because wouldn't want anyone to hear this and feel bad. But we have had recipes where we got the recipe, we took it home. It was from a person that we trusted. They made it. It worked for them, and then when we tried to make it, it just didn't work. And one of the things we ask people to do, which is so great these days, is we'll ask them like, take your phone and like shoot some different moments or shoot a little video. What does it look like when it's at that point? And then they'll send those back to us and we'll say, you see, like I didn't realize blah, blah, blah. So we've had that happen. And we've also just had recipes, particularly Becky, Crystal has had recipes that have just taken a long time to nail. It's not that anything went wrong. It's just that you make it and you're like, well, it's good, but it doesn't taste like what it's supposed to taste like. Right. And like, I would eat that with some butter, but that's not a pretzel. Or I would, that sort of thing. So, and there are things that if it doesn't work, we reject it. We just won't publish it. And we certainly won't publish it until we get it nailed down. Right. So I have 1 or 2 recipes right now that we've been waiting on maybe, it might be 6 weeks, 2 months. That I'm waiting to hear back from the writer, and I'm trying different flours and different brands of flour to see if maybe it could be the brand of flour. It could be because there's different something as little as something you might not think about if you don't cook a lot is a little bit of the difference in like the short grain rice and basmati rice. The differences in grains and things, and when you use them in different recipes. So somebody might say rice, but this particular recipe, it's got to be short grain rice. Right. And you might not know that. They're home making it with short grain, and it's coming out great. And you're back here making it with long grain or some other rice. And you're like, what the heck? This isn't working. Yeah. So those are the kind of things that's how you find things out, like you said, when you're testing. You're like, well, what kind of rice are you using? And then they explain, and you're like, oh, okay. So we all make assumptions based on our life experience and what we're used to cooking with and all of that. So we do try to
that we immediately fill in with our brains is going to be different for each of us. Yeah.
Exactly.
Let's talk for a minute about Billy, sponsor of this week's podcast and an Allure Best of Beauty winner. Billy has essentially recreated our everyday essentials by delivering premium razors and high-performing body care directly to you. Go to mybilly.com to get their starter kit for just $9. That includes their award-winning razor, 2 refill blades, and a magnetic holder that keeps your razor safe and dry between uses. And Billy just released 3 completely clean must-have products to add to your routine: lip balm, dry shampoo, and face wipes. So now is the time to stock up. I love Billy's products, and you will too. They leave our skin feeling so soft. And to express a little love for our show, go to mybilly.com/fueled. It's a small way that you can support us while also getting the best razor ever. It's just $9 to get your starter kit plus free shipping always. Go to mybilly.com/fueled. That's mybillie.com/fueled. So with the kind of the new world, the new conditions, and recipes are one thing, but then grocery shopping is another, because we may not have access to all the things that we normally did, or things may, we don't have the same vast selection maybe that we used to. So talk to us a little bit about that, how you've maybe either adapted recipes for that, or, just tips that you have for people who are listening to be adaptable when they're at the store, being flexible, I should say.
Well, probably more now than I haven't been here that long, but I would say probably more now than we've ever done before. We try to offer substitutions within the recipes themselves. Like we'll put a little note on top that will say, if you can't find this, use this. And sometimes it's just a matter of sort of going beyond your comfort zone. Let's just take pasta, for example. If a recipe says, use fettuccine, and you don't see a fettuccine noodle, that doesn't mean you can't make that recipe. It might not be exactly the same. You might have to adjust the cooking time a little bit for the pasta. Maybe try linguine, or maybe try soba noodles or Chinese egg noodles, or switch from pasta to some kind of grain like rice or barley or farro or something else. So what we're trying to do is just encourage people to you want to follow the recipe to get the good result, but when you're grocery shopping, there are substitutions you can make. And if it's a long skinny pasta, look for other long skinny pastas, and you're probably going to be just fine. Like, don't panic over that. That's going to be okay.
Or protein, if something called for shrimp, we could use a different type of protein and maybe cut it into the same, into smaller bite size if it was, say, chicken or something.
Yeah, and also, lots of spices are really interchangeable. You don't have, yes, the flavor is going to be a little bit different, but it's not necessarily going to be, it's not going to be a disaster. If you don't have allspice, maybe try a little clove and cinnamon mix. If you don't have, Cajun seasoning, maybe, one of the things I do sometimes when I don't have a seasoning mix that someone calls for is I look it up on the internet and I see what's in it, and I see how many of those different spices I've got, and I just put together a little mix to put that in there. So just try to be a little more relaxed about those things. When it comes to baking and the ratio of dry to wet and sugar, you've got to be precise. You've got to be a little bit more precise. But when it comes to savory cooking on your stove, you have a lot more leeway. Same with all the milks. You have, yes, it might be better to use that whole milk if it calls for whole milk, but in most cases, if you're using it in a cheese sauce or something, you can make it work. You might add a little bit of cornstarch, or you might add a little flour slurry to it if you need to thicken it up a little bit. But there are ways to work around it. And, I did something with creme fraiche the other day, and I was embarrassed because I forgot to note that if you can't find creme fraiche, which is a specialty item,
right,
a lot of stores don't have it, it's a little more expensive. What else are you going to use it in? You can use Greek yogurt. You can use sour cream. So will it be exactly the same? No, but it'll be delicious. It's not going to ruin the dish to do that. So we've tried to work with that. We've actually put together stories about substitutions in baking, substitutions in like just a general substitution story. what to do if you can't find butter and eggs. What sweet dishes can you make without butter, eggs, and flour? There's lots of them. There's lots of things you can make. So it either means adapting the recipe or maybe changing your plan slightly. And it's difficult when you're new to cooking to do that.
You
to
don't have the
trust yourself
confidence.
that's going to work out. Right. But the only way you're going to get the confidence is to cook. And if more and more we're cooking every night at home. Most of us aren't going out, so we're getting a lot more experience that way too. And then the grocery shopping is, we're really trying to limit the amount of grocery shopping that we do to because it's, social distancing is important, and the people who are working in the grocery stores, I feel like it's respectful of them if you limit your grocery shopping. If you're not going in there every day after work, give them a chance to restock the shelves and give them a store that's a little bit less crowded, make their lives a little bit more comfortable because they're working very hard on the front line here during this.
Also encouraging ourselves just to be a little bit more resourceful, because if we have a pantry full of ingredients, maybe we don't need to buy one more that's pretty similar to what we already have, And I'm thinking we can link to things in our podcast notes. And so we can link to some of the stories on like the substitution or what you can make if you don't have butter, eggs, or flour. So we can link to some of those so that our readers can see that content specifically, or listeners can see that content specifically. And then you were telling me when we talked last week that you have a 2% milk story.
Well, one of the things I've talked to some grocery store owners during this, and the vast majority, let's say 98% of the people who come in there are very nice and very understand what's going on in the world right now and the difficulties with getting certain products, delivery, supply and demand, all sorts of things like that. But every now and then people go a little wacky because they can't get the exact brand of whatever it is that they want. And sometimes I think people get upset about stuff like that because they're already upset about other things. And it's just like the last straw. Yeah. But I heard from a bunch of people who, when the pandemic first started, maybe a month in, they didn't see 2% milk in their grocery stores, and they all wanted 2% milk, and they were complaining about it. So I was just like so curious about this, and I called a grocery store owner who then called a dairy. And they said one of the reasons that you weren't seeing 2% milk is that they had to, because of social distancing and issues that they were having, they had to cut back on their the number of people on the line producing milk for them to give people more space. So they were producing the more popular milk, which is the whole milk, and the 2% milk, they were producing less of it. It was more labor intensive, and that's why they were doing it. This is what he told me. And there's no way that the consumer could know that. All you know is you go to the grocery store and there's 2% milk. So you complain to the store manager. Right. The store manager may not know that story either. Maybe he doesn't even know why they don't have 2% milk. Or the employee that you happen to go up to who's stocking the milk shelf may not know the reason. But there could be a legitimate reason like that behind it. And most stores, if you know the owners or the managers, if they're smaller stores or you know them, you can go up and ask them and they'll tell you the truth, or you can email them or go on Facebook and ask them a question. But in the day-to-day sort of the way this is going, there are going to be times when weird things are going to happen. I mean, toilet paper we all knew about because it was such a dramatic thing on the paper products and the cleaning products. We understood. We might not have understood why people were hoarding them, but we understood what was going on. Right. But weird things like 2% milk, that was just one to me that I was like, I would never have guessed that. It
makes me laugh as you're even saying it, because I had this, had a voicemail. It was like deep in the stay-at-home order. It was, maybe early April. And so all of this had just hit, and, you feel like the world's falling down around you. And I get the emails that gives me the audio file when someone leaves me a voicemail on my, at work. It sends me the email, which is nice in case you don't call in to check your voicemail. So I'm thinking, somebody left me a voicemail. I mean, nobody even leaving voicemails because, the world's shut down.
Right.
Well, it was a woman, I didn't know her, and she leaves me, "Hi, Molly, this is Miss Doris, and I know that you really care about nutrition and you're just passionate and you seem to know people in these areas." Well, sure. She was calling me because there was a 2% cheese shortage, which and she had been going to all her grocery stores, and I'm like thinking, "Miss Doris, just stay at home like you're
Exactly.
supposed to." And she didn't sound young. And I thought, oh
Yeah.
my gosh. And that was, of everything that was happening, there wasn't anything else. It wasn't, oh, and this serious issue. It was like, we've got to find a solution to this problem. And there's no 2% cheese to be found in the city. And it was probably largely because of what you just said, that they were
Right.
having to be selective in production.
And really, if you have to live without that 2% cheese or that 2% milk for a few weeks, it's not ideal. I realize that. And people do have dietary restrictions and things that they're really working on with themselves. And I get that. I'm not trying to be flip about it. But there's nothing you can do, and you got to work around it.
Yeah.
You have to figure out
I wonder
what you're
how
going to
many
do
people
instead.
went to the full fat version and said, "Oh, thank you." How long it had been since they'd had whole milk or real cheese? They were probably like, "Wow."
I know. That is hard to go back, right?
And then the last thing that I know that you have a bunch of tips on is, storage. So how to freeze, how to store things that maybe are kind of not the norm that we don't think of, because I think there is still, in some of us, I know certain products I feel this way about, that when we see it, we don't always see it. So we want to really stock up on it. So what are ways to make sure things don't go bad on us?
Well, I mean, mainly, most of the products that you have in your pantry, as long as you've got them in a secure container, they're going to be fine. Your flours and things like that. When it comes to fresh produce, many things can be frozen. Almost everything can be frozen. Not everything, but a lot of things. We just had a story. A writer, Angela Davis, wrote for us about this topic, and she actually said something like that, like you can freeze almost anything. And when you look at corn, peas, broccoli, cauliflower, all those things you see in the frozen,
right?
At the grocery, you can freeze them at home too. And you can freeze, onions and peppers and garlic and all of that as well. So, what you don't want to freeze are things that have really high moisture content. You want to freeze cucumbers and lettuce, obviously things that once you thaw them out are going to be mushy and not retain their quality. A lot of frozen vegetables that you buy in the grocery store, and even the ones you freeze yourself, they taste really great when you thaw them and cook them in something. And most of the time what you're going to do is give them a quick blanching in hot water, and then, get them out of the hot water quickly and, lay them out, let them, get kind of, you don't want to freeze them all in that hot water. So you want to get them, maybe put them on a sheet pan and spread them out and let them until they're really solid, and then put them in a container. And if you don't want to use Ziploc bags, you can use whatever freezer containers you use. You want to make sure that things are frozen separately so that you don't have a big giant pile of something. Sometimes, you'll end up with that even in the grocery store.
Yeah.
Like you'll go buy broccoli, it's like a big block of broccoli. You don't want that if you can help it.
Right.
So that's one of the things you can really you can do. And the same with fresh herbs. You can freeze them. You can chop them up, and lay them flat so you can break off little pieces of them. Like, let's say you want to chop all your parsley up and then freeze it nice and flat. When you need parsley, you can just break off chunks of it into the amounts that you need. So
what about putting herbs with a little bit of olive oil, like in an ice cube tray? Like if you had chopped.
Yeah, absolutely. You can do that if you don't mind. If you don't mind having the oil, or you can actually. I think one of the things she talked about was actually putting them in water and doing that as well, because then you can let that melt if you don't want oil in there.
Okay, like in the next dish that you might use it in. Yeah.
Right. And then you absolutely just have to remember to mark the date, what it is, and the amount if you can. Right. So like if you freeze, if you're freezing a pound of broccoli, you want to write on there, this is, the date, broccoli florets, 1 pound. And then you'll know. And you also don't want to leave them in there forever. Like, yes, you can freeze things, but you don't want to leave them in your freezer for 6 months. You want to try to use them when you can. But they'll last a good long time. And then remember too that, if you defrost something, and if it's, let's say it's fruit or something, and you don't like the way it froze, make it into a smoothie, or, make it into a fruit sauce to go on top of ice cream or something like that. Don't throw it out,
right.
Or making jams is another way to save summer produce. And I'm actually one of those people who's a little nervous about making jams because I just don't do it that often. But it's really not very difficult, and probably can get a batch of jam made in an hour in an afternoon. If you've got a big batch of strawberries or raspberries and you don't want them to go bad, that's a great thing to do with them as well, so you're not wasting them.
And that's when, like you were talking about, making your own spice blends. If you're doing something like that, then you can also control how much sugar you're adding to it.
Exactly. Yeah. You do need some sugar if you're making a jam so that it's shelf stable. You don't want to end up with, well, if you end up with sauce, you end up with sauce, but you want to be able to spread it. So, but yeah, absolutely. There's lots of, and there's just also just making sure you're rotating things in your pantry. One of the things we found when people were staying home more is they started going through their pantries, and we do a chat every Wednesday at the Washington Post at noon on the site. And people would write in and tell us what they had discovered in their pantry. It was kind of amazing, like, well, I found this vinegar from, 2005. Do you think it's still good? And we'd be like, well, this theoretically lasts forever, but I would have to open up and give it a good sniff and really, So you want to make sure you're going in your pantry, you're pulling things from the back to the front, and you are eating what you have. You're not going. We have a recipe finder at the Post, and you can go in and put in an ingredient and come up with recipes that have that in it. So let's say you've got this in your freezer, you're not sure what to do with it. Go to a trusted source and search under that ingredient. See what you can make.
It's kind of a cool challenge to do if you thought, work your way through your pantry and all these things that are in there, find something to do with them before you're stocking up on your next trip. That'd be a cool thing to do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that we haven't covered for our listeners that you find people asking you a lot, either about just your job in general as a food writer, anything that we haven't covered about, the transition or kind of, how you ended up here, anything to share?
No, I mean, I feel like this is an extraordinary time to be a recipes editor at a national publication, because although, food and cooking has long been a craze and a hobby, and there's whole networks devoted to it, and a million websites and, YouTube channels and everything, with the pandemic, it actually, cooking became essential for so many more people in this country. And so the timing of landing in this position it's been really fascinating to watch this sort of unfold. Mm-hmm. We've had so many people write to us who say, I've never cooked before, but now I'm home alone, or I'm home with my husband, or I'm home with my 2 kids. We eat out 3 or 4 times a week. We can't anymore. And I'm going crazy. What can I do? And we're offering, we feel like we're actually offering a service that people need. Maybe it was something they wanted before, but now they really need it. And it's been gratifying, really gratifying to be able to help people. Mm-hmm. And not only feed their families, but gain the confidence of being in the kitchen. And I hope that there's not much positive to come out of this terrible situation, but maybe having people be more comfortable in their own kitchen,
I agree.
And learning skills, and maybe it's a little more healthy for them, or at least they have more control over what is going into their food. They might, their choices will determine whether it's more healthy. But I think that's been a real. I hope that'll be a silver lining that will come out of this. That people in America and across the world will just be more comfortable in this world, because it's really rewarding to cook for yourself, and it's it's a hobby that actually pays off, in good health, and it can save you money, and you can have delicious things to eat.
And you're in this really unique position to guide people, to support them, to cheerlead them as they're making this transition and having like this next level of growth in their personal lives as well.
Yeah, I hope so. We're doing our best.
Yes, you are. You are. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been, I just glanced down and it's been over an hour. I'm like, I miss my time with Ann. I'm so happy to have this, conversation. I'm grateful for you carving out this time with me.
Well, I really appreciate you calling me. It was lovely to catch up with you.
All right. Thanks, Ann.
Take care.
I am so honored and so grateful to Ann for joining us. I always learn so much from her from a creativity and writing standpoint, but also just from a personal viewpoint and the way that she lives her life and the calmness that she infuses into everything that she does. And as mentioned, I will be including the links that Ann talked about in the show notes of this episode. And let me know what you think. I know we've got a lot of really fantastic articles that she's written. So if you try out some of her tips, share it with me. I will share it with her. We always love to hear about it. I am registered dietitian Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. If you would like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com, and you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And join us next week for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life.